Dr. Sara Mizban. She's the Community Arts Engagement Specialist for Hawai'i Arts Alliance. Thank you. Supporting their arts education program, Turnaround Arts Hawaii, and spearheading a new alliance initiative geared toward destigmatizing mental health through the use of arts and creative advocacy. Please help me in welcoming Sara to the stage.
Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you to my fellow storytellers. These have been really powerful stories. I also want to acknowledge our space. This feels like a very healing space. So, well done on the choice of this place. I'd like to start off by saying how grateful I am to Alana Eagle and the entire Civil Beat staff for believing in the importance of this topic and for their willingness to partner with us at the Hawai'i Arts Alliance and with Mental Health America of Hawaii as we collectively push forward this initiative of destigmatizing mental health. The process of preparing for this event has given me the opportunity to take pause and reflect on my journey up until this point. It wasn't that long ago that my relationship to depression and anxiety shifted. So I feel like it's perfect timing for me to take a step back and honor how far I've come. Before I start, I'd like to bring my family into the room with me. My family has endured a great deal of struggle in their pursuit for creating a better life for themselves and for their children. And while we often didn't see eye to eye on things, I'm happy that I can now be in a place where I recognize that they too are only humans that trying to get through this crazy world in the best way that they know how. And even with their flaws, I know that I got my strength and resilience from them, and I am forever grateful. When Alana asked me to be a storyteller at this event, it took me a few days to respond to her email. My mind, as it knows best to do, started thinking about every possible reason why I shouldn't do this. Just the mere thought of having 150 faces looking at me was terrifying. But more so, I was worried that in sharing my story, I might say something that might hurt my family. Or worse, that one of their friends would come across this on Facebook and I would bring shame to my family name. And that made me incredibly sick to my stomach. As all the different fears started popping into my head, I started to notice the way they began to take over my body as they've done so many times before. The tightening of my chest, the constriction of my throat, the ceasing of breathing. I reminded myself, just pause. Breathe in and make space in my belly. And as I did that, I remembered how the very fact that I had kept all of my fears and pain trapped inside of me with no air for them to breathe was the very reason I suffered from mental illness for so long. And it's true, standing up here is frightening. And I may say something that could hurt people I love. But I know that over the last couple years, sharing my story with people around me has been critical in me recognizing that I'm not alone in this world. That so many people are touched by mental illness, whether it be themselves in their family, their partnerships, or even in their workplace. It's just too prevalent and too dire for us to not be talking about this anymore. So I will share a little bit about my story with you. I grew up in a conservative family in a tight-knit community in Los Angeles. My parents, like many other Iranians at that time, immigrated from Iran to the States before the revolution. Growing up in Tehrangeles, as we call it, greatly exposed me to my culture. I learned to speak Farsi and even how to read and write. There were a ton of Persian restaurants everywhere, although none of them were as good as my mom's cooking. I started taking Persian dance class when I was 15 years old, and a year later was asked to join a Persian dance company, a professional one. Being Persian was, and still is, something I am incredibly proud of. But there was another side to being Persian that was very challenging. Persians are very private people. No one ever talks about any problems that are going on in their lives, and I imagine there are others here that might feel that way about their cultures. It became normal not to talk about things. But when I started becoming aware of the serious problems that were going on at home, and when talking about them was completely out of the question, I had no choice but to be really good at putting on a show. And that was the start to my long battle with high-functioning depression. I was first diagnosed with major depressive disorder with suicidal ideation at 17 years old. I think in some subconscious part of myself, I'd hoped that this heavy diagnosis would somehow force my family to step back and reevaluate the way things were being done. But at the age of 17, I didn't really understand how deep the problems were. I just sensed that things were bad. So nothing really changed, and I somehow had to just keep pushing on. I began college the year after, as was expected of me, and just like most of my peers, I live and commuted from home. I started out as a biology major because becoming a doctor was one of the acceptable professions, and somehow I ended up still a doctor. But it's no surprise that I ended up in social sciences. Studying human behavior became a way for me to learn about myself and my family. And I hope that my learning would also give me some answers as to how I could possibly make things better for us. When 4 years in college wasn't enough to figure this out, I decided to apply for a doctoral program in clinical psychology. It was the first time I was away from home as I moved to the Bay Area. I was hanging out with a bunch of therapists in training as we analyzed ourselves and our work all the time. And while I was learning so much and I was starting to help my clients, I still couldn't figure out how to help the people that were closest to me. And it ate away at me. I was grappling with crippling depressive episodes. I felt like I was on high alert at all times. Being almost 400 miles away from home didn't stop me from worrying about the people that were back home. I don't think I actually even knew how to function without worry. There were so many gems during my time in graduate school that helped push me along on my journey. But my saving grace was therapy, and specifically somatic therapy. And I'm really glad that Keola shared the story of how important the body work is. I didn't even really know what somatic therapy was at the time. I only picked Peter's name from a long list of therapists online because I needed a therapist, and I was amused by the fact that his name was Mr. Right. As you can guess from the name, somatic therapy is based on the premise that our bodies provide us with a great deal of information. By trusting our bodily wisdom, we cultivate inner awareness. We learn about our body's sensations and movements, and we slowly become more comfortable with the various and disparate experiences that come up. In doing so, we form a relationship with our inner selves, and along with our emotions, fears, and our beliefs. When we listen to our bodies and we give it a voice, we can access the strength and resources we need in order to heal. By the way, this was straight from my dissertation, which I haven't opened until this piece. Figured it was time to bring it back to life. So I understand all of that on a very intellectual level, that our bodies play a critical role in forming a relationship with our inner selves and subsequently in the healing of trauma. But it wasn't easy for me to understand that on a kinesthetic level, and I think that's one of the difficulties with our society, is that lack of connection between the two. To do it, you have to stop and listen. And my functioning has always been to shut up and keep going. Don't stop, stay busy, push through. It wasn't until I kept getting sick, that I was always exhausted, that I was always overwhelmed. My depression felt worse than ever. Then I knew something had to give. I had been living in Los Angeles since I had graduated, and what felt like a blink of an eye was actually 7 years of my life had passed by. I had given up. There was nothing left for me to give to anyone else. You know that feeling when you get really sick and you're just like, I can't do anything. That was me 2 weeks ago. I couldn't go to work. I was just exhausted. I mean, you just can't do anything. All you can do is just stop and take care of yourself. It was like that, but like times 1,000. At that point, I knew I had to make a choice. I could continue at this pace, sacrifice myself, my health, to a cause that I'd learned time and time again was impossible for me to save. Or I could save myself. And that's when my journey brought me to Hawaii, a place that values slowing down, a place where the land grounds me, the ocean frees me, and the sun warms me. A place that has given me the space to learn for the first time how to breathe, to listen to my body and give it voice. A place where I've met others who are on similar journeys as me. A culture that values community and comes together, as with tonight, for the betterment of ourselves and our world. And while I still grieve the fact that I can't save my family, I'm giving myself a shot. And who knows, maybe in sharing my story, I can give someone else a shot at their lives. Thank you.